Good evening. Tonight we examine the collision of radical transparency and strategic seclusion in the United States. The Epstein files have officially transitioned from a trickle to a torrent. Thanks to a new federal law and a powerful AI tool called Reducto, over 1.4 million emails are now searchable on jmail.world. The data is claiming scopes in the highest echelons of law, finance, and diplomacy from New York to Paris. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the European elites are taking the opposite approach. Facing a geo-economic existential crisis, EU leaders have pulled up the drawbridge at Alden Basin Castle. They aren't just looking for security, they're looking for a spectacle of strength to prove that Europe can still compete with the giants. I'm Mana Moselhi, and this is In Focus. It's the dump the global elite feared, using an AI tool to process 3 million pages of DOJ documents. Investigators have mapped Jeffrey Epstein's networks with terrifying precisions. The Alarm Index, a scoring system ranging from 1 to 10 based on the disturbing nature of the content, has already forced the resignation of Brad Kopp, Paul Weiss, Miroslav Lajčák, Slovakia, and Jack Lang, the Arab World Institute. This isn't just about photos, it's about 11,300 emails with the White House counsel and the incest jokes of the ultra-wealthy. So joining us to dissect the digital fallout is Professor David K. Johnston, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative, journalist, and professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Thank you so much for your time and for being with us. And let me start by asking, we've had dribs and drops for years. How does the use of the Reducto AI and the jmail.world database change the nature of this investigation?
Well, only half of the Epstein documents have been partially released. There's a lot of redactions in them, many of them improper. But it is such a massive file, 3 million pages, that it would take a terribly long time for human beings eyeballing these to go through them. What AI allows you to do is say, I want information about this or that. Howard Lutnick, Donald Trump's commerce secretary, who was Jeffrey Epstein's next door neighbor in New York City, said the first thing he did was search his own name. He says, we all do that. I didn't search my name, but he did. And he's all over the place. And it showed that he had lied in the past about his relationship with Epstein, not in any way that suggests any wrongdoing by him at all, not at all. But the AI tools are just absolutely central to being able to quickly find the wheat and separate it from the chaff.
We've seen Brad Kopp and Jack Lang resign this week. Is this the tip of the iceberg, or are these individuals being targeted for social boorishness rather than criminal complicity? What do you think?
Well, first of all, your opening was much better than I've heard on any American broadcast outlet, including the ones I appear on. So bravo for putting this in the right perspective about selectively, essentially releasing and withholding and doing it in language people can understand. It's fascinating that while the U.S. government sees nothing it can do, Pam Bondi, the American Attorney General appointed by Donald Trump, says that there are no charges, there's no crimes. you're seeing governments in other countries and nonprofit organizations look at what's been disclosed and either pushing people out the door or demanding investigations to learn more. And that's a real shaming of the American administration, Donald Trump's administration. Now, there are going to be some people who are going to be wrongly hurt here. The fact that your name is in those files doesn't tell you anything about whether you did anything improper. And a con artist like Epstein, and I've covered many con artists, a number have gone to prison because of my reporting. Some of them died in prison. They got such long sentences. The con artists try to surround themselves with people who will create an aura of invincibility. Oh, I'm connected to the president, so you better not mess with me. Many of those people did nothing wrong except allowing them to be photographed with Epstein.
Mm-hmm. Now, the data shows that 19% of emails were with financiers. As a Pulitzer winner for tax and corporate reporting, what does this tell about how Epstein used the veneer of business to shield his activities?
Well, Jeffrey Epstein has held himself out as being this great financial genius and tax genius on Wall Street. He was neither. He was running, as Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, said, an extortion racket. He would get rich men into compromising positions with girls, some of them apparently as young as 12. In fact, one report perhaps only 9 years old, and then use that to force money out of them, to extort them. Now, he certainly got people who gave him valuable tips about buy this or sell that. That's clearly what's going on. It may or may not be criminal depending on the circumstances. But the idea that, for example, he was paid by one of the most well-known leaders on Wall Street, almost $100 million for his tax advice, not credible, not what was going on. That's a cover story.
Then what?
Well, it was the extortion. It was very simply, as Howard put very plainly, getting men in compromising positions. Epstein tried to get Howard Lutnick to receive a massage from a girl so that he would have leverage over him through photographs and videotape. Mm-hmm. And a number of the young women's survivors, some under pseudonyms, some openly, have said that they were raped, sodomized, in one case tied down and raped and punched in the face by Donald Trump. Now, we don't have proof of that. I want to be very clear. And Donald Trump insists he did nothing that was improper. But we have lots of witnesses who say they were, and the Trump administration is withholding the documents that these survivors say, the images, both still and video, that they say would demonstrate they're telling the truth and Trump is lying. Why would you withhold it if you're innocent, as Donald Trump says? If you never did anything wrong, why wouldn't you just release all the documents?
The 6 million.
Yes, the whole 6 million, which the law Trump signed requires his administration to do, but which Attorney General Pam Bondi made very clear in testimony yesterday they do not intend to do.
Right. Now, the LLM, or the language large model, flagged 1,474 emails is very disturbing. In your view, do these messages provide enough probable cause for new federal indictments under the November transparency law?
Well, there's probable cause galore in these files for many offenses. Here's the problem. Most felonies in America have a 5-year statute of limitations. So from the time the crime was committed, you have 60 months to bring a criminal charge. Jeffrey Epstein died 6 years ago. So not possible to touch a lot of these things. And that weakens the justification for any redacting of the names of grown men or women who were around Jeffrey Epstein. Now, could there be some criminal charges? Yes. There are conspiracy laws. There may be an ongoing offense. For example, if you embezzle money from a bank and put it back, the crime continues until you disclose it. So there may be charges that could be brought, but there is absolutely zero chance that the Trump administration will charge anyone with a crime based on the Epstein files. And they have said that plainly, clearly, and repeatedly.
And that in itself is a big question mark about the credibility of the this world power. We're speaking about the United States of America, that has always said that it is the protector of human rights, of principles, values, and all that. That isn't that a big question mark for the American people themselves?
Oh, absolutely. I warned people in 2011, and I've known Donald since 1988. I've spent hundreds of hours with him and written 3.5 books about him, that if Donald ever got to the White House, he would see himself as a dictator. He would believe he was all powerful. And I was kind of mocked for that in 2011. Well, last year, Trump said, I run the country and the whole world. He's behaving like a dictator. He hasn't fully consolidated his power, but he's working at it. And who is he standing up for? He's standing up for many of the most vicious dictators in the world, and he's attacking free and democratic societies because that's who he is. He's doing enormous damage, and we are seeing the post-World War II order come apart. Whether the ruptures can be healed in a future administration, assuming Trump is not able to make his dictatorship permanent, and that's an open question at the moment. Can we rebuild a world that's more oriented towards peace, liberty, and freedom? I sure hope so.
Yeah, we'll hope so. Now, 11,300 emails with Obama's White House counsel, averaging one every day and a half for 5 years. How does the establishment explain away that level of intimacy with a convicted sex offender?
Yeah, that's a data point I'm not familiar with. This is the Obama White House?
Yes.
I haven't seen that, so I unfortunately can't comment on it, but it probably falls under this, I want to connect myself to presidents of both parties in order to create an aura of invincibility around me. But trust me, as soon as we get off, I'm going to go look at that.
But let me here ask, because these were the information that we got from reports that were revealed. How do how is the American society taking from such huge numbers of emails between a president, a former president, or a council of presidency, and between a sex offender? What does that reveal, and what does that tell about the judiciary system in the United States?
Sure. Well, the United States criminal justice system is focused on street crime, blue-collar crime, robberies, murders, burglaries, arsons.
Sex offending, no. Human trafficking, no.
And yes, no, also including rape. But it is not at all focused on white-collar crime. And at the center of the sex trafficking is really white-collar crime. It is transactions between wealthy and powerful people around the world who have no moral character and see nothing wrong with raping 12-year-old girls, and they find each other. And so once this gets into that area of white-collar crime, there's far less enforcement, far weaker laws. This is a worldwide problem that I've written about for years, as well as when I was a New York Times investigative reporter, I wrote at great length about the moral collapse of the accounting and legal industries in America and documented it quite thoroughly. The United States has a real fundamental problem. There are millions of people who call themselves conservatives and Christians who support Donald Trump. And when you say, well, what about if it's in fact true that he raped girls who were 11 and 12 years old, punched one in the face after raping her? And they go, well, he's not doing that anymore. So since he's not doing it now, it's okay. I mean, there's been a real degrading of fundamental moral standards that whether you go to a mosque, a synagogue, or a church, you should have learned as a child, or your parents should have taught you. And Donald Trump's own words make it clear that he has no moral core, and he is not responsive to moral questions. I asked him one time, We were walking along the boardwalk in Atlantic City, New Jersey, about the children who were 12, 13, and 14 who gambled away thousands and thousands of dollars in his casinos. These were kids who were rich. And you would expect him to say, oh, yeah, that shouldn't have happened, or I've fired the people involved. And he just, without any emotion, said, I paid a fine. There is no moral core there. He once referred to his daughter, Tiffany, with his second wife. They were shooting a photo shoot, and she needed to adjust her dress, and she tried to hand the baby over to Donald, who said, get that away from me. Who refers to their child as that?
Right. So the data, on the other hand, shows Epstein bombarded Bill Gates with emails despite very few responses. Is this evidence of Epstein's desperation, or a classic grooming technique used on high net worth targets?
Well, I wouldn't call it grooming. I mean, he clearly wanted to get money from Gates. He was hoping he could get Gates in a compromising position because at the time Gates was the wealthiest man in the world. Bill Gates, a much savvier guy than that. But, you know, there are lots of men who do foolish things and they don't think with their head the way they should. But it appears he failed with Bill Gates. We don't know for sure. I have to tell you, the thing that's most significant, I think, that's come out is I've had for years people tell me, oh, they were killing the girls. And I went, yeah, you don't have any evidence of that. That sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. If you get some facts, come back to me. Well, lo and behold, the Epstein file shows that when Jeffrey Epstein knew there was a high likelihood the FBI would be at his door within a day or three with a search warrant, he bought 330 gallons of sulfuric acid. That's a very good product to use to dismember and dispose of a body and get rid of the evidence. And we've had murder cases where that's been done. And I think the big question Congress should be asking right now is, what's the story about those 330 gallons of sulfuric acid?
Okay, that also to be raised, a big question mark to be raised. Now, these emails cover the period after his first conviction. Does this archive finally holds the smoking gun regarding how he secured such a lenient plea deal from the federal prosecutors?
Well, there's no question he got an unbelievable sweetheart deal in which he tried to exempt everyone else around him. It's inexplicable why this happened. It raises the question of whether the U.S. attorney in Florida at the time, Alex Acosta, who later became Trump's labor secretary in his first term, had been compromised in some way. It is completely inexplicable what happened here. And the fact that Donald Trump went to the police chief in in Palm Beach, Florida, and said, everybody knows what he's doing, Epstein is doing. That A, shows Trump lied when he says, I never knew what he was doing. And B, it's an old Donald Trump technique he's used and I've documented of going to law enforcement when he's done something bad and saying, oh, well, listen, let me offer you up the people around me on a silver platter. Just don't come after me. I'll help you get these other people. This whole thing is a terrible stain on law enforcement. It is quite literally inexplicable. And Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General today, was the Florida Attorney General for the state of Florida when a lot of this went on. And her answer to everything, if you ask a question about it, is to hold you in contempt. How dare you question what I'm saying? Even if you're a member of Congress or a U.S. Senator, she literally in her attitude goes, how dare you question me? We have never seen this from cabinet officers in the United States testifying before Congress. This goes to the fact that we have a convicted criminal, a lifelong white-collar crime family boss, third-generation boss of a four-generation white-collar family in the presidency. And so long as that persists, nothing is going to be done by the federal government, by the administration. If the Democrats regain control of the House and the Senate, but especially the House, they will begin investigating this next year because they will have the tools to issue subpoenas, to call in witnesses, to grant people immunity. And I expect them to behave like white-collar prosecutors. You go after low-level people, you build a case against them, and then you say, okay, you can go to prison or you can hand me the person above you. give me the evidence to get the person above you, and we'll make a deal. And that's what I expect will happen starting next year, assuming the Democrats get control of the House and perhaps the Senate.
We'll have to wait until November to know. But until that time, we're seeing lots and lots of new everything. Professor Johnston, Professor Johnston, we thank you so much for your time and for your, of course, valuable insights. And while the digital curtains are being ripped back on the global elite in New York, the political elite in Europe are pulling up the drawbridge, literally, in an attempt to save a union that feels increasingly fragile. Now, welcome to Oldham Basin. It's a 16th century castle with a moat, high vaulted ceilings, and as of today, the 27 leaders of the European Union. They are here for a strategic brainstorming session on competitiveness, guided by existential warnings of Mario Draghi and Enrico Letta. In an era where Trump's Mar-a-Lago and Takeshi's Japan are moving at lightning speed, Europe is betting that a quiet retreat behind stone walls can produce the fully mature and independent superpower they have promised since Maastricht. Right now we head to Paris to speak with Mr. Meher Nicholas Fazili, Director of the EU Asian Centre, about the Fortress Europe mentality. Now, Mr. Meher, historians, good to have you, sir, with us. Are you here?
Pleasure, my pleasure.
Right. Now, historians say castles were a reaction to a power vacuum. Is the EU heading to Oldham Basin because they feel a vacuum left by a retreating US or an aggressive China?
I'm delighted to join you today, Mona. It's what's happening today in that small Renaissance era castle in Flanders, so that would be the northern part of Belgium, is very interesting because it signals something very important to the Americans and the Chinese. It signals that Europe is weak, very weak. It also signals that Europe is divided. And it signals that Europe is trying to change to, quote unquote, confront Washington and Beijing, right? Mm-hmm. So, and signaling is important because, we live in an age where everything is symbolic, everything is communication. And so when they send a signal, the question is, to whom are they sending a signal? In part, to their own public opinion, yes. So in part, because we have elections, we have very important elections in many European countries. And here I would include the UK, even though, Keir Starmer is not physically present today at the retreat, and they call it a retreat or brainstorming session, right? So in that castle, we don't have Keir Starmer or Tony Blair, but the spirit of Tony Blair and George Bush is there, right? And so they have many important elections at municipal level and county level in big European countries like France and Britain in the next 2 months. And I think that's why they're trying to signal to their public opinion that, they're on top, quote unquote. And they also, more importantly, like I said, sending signals to America and China, telling them, we are Europe, we should be respected, we should be feared. That's how Macron speaks, which is very silly. We should be feared, right? Only the weak speak like that. So only a weak person will tell his competitors, I think you should fear me, right? And that's exactly how Ursula von der Leyen and Macron talk about China and America. So what I'm coming at is, of course, Trump is the elephant in the room. And so that is why people like Macron, but also, Europe is a bit complicated constitutionally. So there is the European Commission led by Ursula von der Leyen. And then there is a grouping of national governments led by a Portuguese chap called Antonio Costa. And it's called the Council of Europe. So officially, the invitation for today's brainstorming was issued not by the EU Commission, by the Council of Europe, issued by Antonio Costa, right? But anyway, and you're absolutely right. You mentioned Mario Draghi and
exactly.
And later,
and let me ask you about Mario Draghi. And Mario Draghi warned that Europe is failing behind or falling by 15% in GDP compared to the US. So can a retreat actually produce the 800 billion euros in annual investment he says is required to catch up?
The short, cynical answer is no. Now, is Draghi's intention, like verbally, what Draghi says, is it good? Yes, it is good. And I'm personally, I'm proud of today's retreat or brainstorming because officially Antonio Costa, when he sent the invitation letter to European heads of states and government 2 weeks ago, he used an expression I have invented for what it's worth, and it's called the new geoeconomic context. I coined the expression new geoeconomic context, and today on the official, to-do list or official brainstorming letter, it is one of the main things they're supposed to discuss. But even I should be happy after all. I'm not very happy about what they're doing because it's coming too late. So, what does it mean, new geoeconomic context? Like you said, Europe is falling behind in investment. So Draghi is right, when I'm coming at, if you will, the diagnosis. So let's say that Draghi is a doctor. The analysis or description of diagnosis is quite good, right? But it's the recipe. It is a solution which Draghi and Macron and von der Leyen propose, which are ridiculous. At least, there is an improvement because now they realize they're sick. So until recently, they did not realize that they had a problem. So at least now, you could say with Letta and Draghi, they're realizing there's a problem, but they will never be able to fix it. Very briefly, yeah.
But then, as you respectively mentioned, Antonio Costa called 2026 the decisive year. If this retreat ends without a Versailles-style declaration, has the EU officially lost the race to the new industrial era?
Absolutely, because the figures are cruel, and actually the economic and industrial reality is much worse than what Draghi says. And how do we know that? There's something very easy I tell my students about. It's called the MSCI World Index, right? It was invented by Morgan Stanley in the 1980s, 84, when Richard Fisher was the CEO of Morgan Stanley. He was a good friend of President Reagan. And he said, we're going to take the financial market weight of every country, no matter if the country is a democracy or dictatorship, no matter if it's socialist or market economy, we're going to look at the market cap of all companies in a particular country, and that will allow us to come up with a weight, right, with a relative size. And when the Morgan Stanley World Index was created in 1984, the market cap of America, Wall Street, was only 30 or 25% more than Germany, France, and England, right? So we had Germany, France, and the UK together. It was only 30% less than America. Today, France, Germany, and the UK, their market cap is 20 times less than the size of Wall Street. So it means they have collapsed. One country alone, America, today represents 77% of the Morgan Stanley World Index. And why have they collapsed? Here, Draghi is right, because they're growing too slowly. So they have a GDP growth problem. And another problem, they're unable to innovate technologically, right? But I'm sorry, people like Draghi and Letta, it's their fault, for 15, 20 years, they were in office in Brussels and Rome while the economies of Italy and France were collapsing. So It's almost too easy for them today to say, oh, I know how to fix things.
Yes, but it's too hard to fix things, really. Mr. Mayor Ferzeli, we thank you so much for being with us, and good to have you as usual. Now, 1 million emails scored by an alarm index, one castle protected by a moat. Today, we see a world where the elite are either being exposed by the very technology they help fund, or are retreating into the architecture of the 1500s to find a way forward. The big stick can still bruise, but it no longer disciplines. Influence today flows from being indispensable, not unavoidable. We leave you with the thought as the leaders in the olden BC finish the dinner, and the servers at jmail.world continue to process the next million pages. That was In Focus. I'm Mona Muselhi. See it no more.